welcome to Turtle Tracks Podcast. This is your host, Brian Van Hooker, and I'm here with Kenn Scott, who played a bunch of different Foot Ninja and Raphael in several different capacities in the first two Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. Kenn, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that, Brian. Thanks very much. It's good to be here with you. I appreciate you reaching out.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. I just read, or I didn't read it. I listened to the audiobook. I can't take the credit for reading it because my attention spans lately is very divided. So I listened to the wonderful audiobook version of your book, which is Teenage Ninja to Mutant Turtle, which is a lot of fun. It's been on my reading list for a while, and I'm glad I finally got to it. It's a really fun book.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to it, and thanks for sharing that. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's funny what you said at the beginning as you started to say, hey, I've been reading or I read your book. So many people today listen to audiobooks, and I had a great time recording this one. It's me doing it, and I had a lot of fun working with my friends in the studio making it happen. But I remember talking to somebody once, and they said, hey, I read your book. And I go, oh, no kidding, blah, blah, blah. We talked a couple of questions. And as I talked to them, I realized they didn't actually read it. They just listened to it.
Yeah.
But the way they communicated it was, I read your book.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting how with today's technology and the way we absorb information, that verb, I read your book, now no longer means I actually read anything.
Yeah.
I just listened to something the whole time. So just a little bit of a communication thing that's changing in our world. I thought that was kind of funny.
I think because I still want the credit for having read something. Even if I haven't, even if I've only listened to it, I still want to say I read it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, when you go see a play or a movie, you don't say I read your movie or I read the play,
right?
But
yeah.
You're listening to it and hearing it. But regardless, to put the book together was a lot of fun, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it because the whole point of doing that book was because I've been going to Comic-Cons and meeting fans for like over 30 years now. And people, this movie and the Turtle franchise has touched people in so many ways. They're hungry for information. They're hungry for stories and anecdotes and things about making the movie and what was this like and what was that like. That over the years, sharing these stories and experiencing the joy and the fun of telling them, but also the joy and the fun of seeing other people get them, I was able to put this book together. And I always say this, it sounds kind of hokey, but it really was like my gift to Turtle fans. It was like, here's an insider's view to what it was like making the Ninja Turtle movies. It's my insider's view. It's very particular to my perspective, but this is my version of what's going on. And if you want to know what it was like to be behind the scenes, here you go.
What I liked about it too, and I didn't know this going in, was it kind of is this. It's interesting to hear you step from background Foot Ninja to like elite Foot Ninja to Raphael stunt performer to work like doing the main performer in the Secret of the Ooze. Like I didn't know. It was interesting to hear that all the different slots that you feel, but also like how you got from one stage to the next because I didn't know that going in. It was really interesting, and I think I this is my I love everything Turtles, but I love this movie more than anything, and I think I know everything, and I learned a bunch.
Yeah, that's funny. You're not the only one to say that. There's a great fan out there of Ninja Turtles, Michelle Ivy. She's probably one of the
she's a friend of mine. Yeah,
probably the single greatest Ninja Turtle fan that's out there.
She outranks us all, every Turtle fan. She's the official #1 Turtle fan. Yeah.
And when I got the thumbs up from Michelle, and she was like, "There was things in here I didn't know," I was like, "Well, there you go." It doesn't get any closer than the actual turtle telling the tales. But yeah, my whole journey, after being an actor and all that in LA, I became a producer and a director, and I was writing screenplays like so many people in Los Angeles, and studying the craft of writing screenplays and understanding the heroic journey and what you're sending somebody on, how they have to overcome obstacles and eventually achieve their goal, the Golden Fleece, or defeating the evil side of the Empire in Star Wars, whatever it might be. So when I put this book together, I tried to craft it a little bit in that sense of here's a journey. Here's a guy who's setting out with a goal, and here's the obstacles and the help and everything that comes along as he's doing it. But it wasn't just that singular goal. I knew that there was this goal of wanting to be an action hero in the movies. But the Ninja Turtle franchise gave me this amazing vehicle to get my entree into working on movies, just as like an extra, doing martial arts in a movie. Then, like you said, I went because I was hired just to be a foot soldier. Not many people can say this, Brian, but my first professional job out of college was being a ninja. It says so right there. Like, not many people can say that. So I got my ninja job. Then by working with Pat Johnson, the stunt coordinator, and trying to achieve my dreams and put my goals out there, I was able to do more and more. And I became the fellow chucker who does the nunchucks against Michelangelo and all this other stuff. And then the guy that was Raphael got hurt, and I was the right height and had the right martial arts abilities to become Raphael. And then when the second movie rolled around, opportunity opened up there. So it was kind of like this step-by-step transition all the way through the gauntlet, achieving those goals. And it's a pretty unique story, I think. And so being able to put it all together like that in a cohesive thread that made sense and was ultimately enjoyable by people was a real blessing for me. For me, I felt like I accomplished something. That was great.
Well, I mean, I'll leave plenty of spoilers for the book, but there's a couple stories that I definitely wanted to kind of, if you don't mind, relaying a little bit. I love the story. So you get a job as, I mean, I guess let's start with how you got the job as the original Foot Ninja. Like you were in North Carolina, living there, and you had a background in, oh goodness, I don't know martial arts, so I'm like struggling to remember which.
Let's just say karate.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm an idiot with that. I apologize.
No, it's great. It's fine.
So you were an accomplished martial artist at that point, but like, so like, what was the audition for background Foot?
Well, what happened was they shot the movie in North Carolina, so they reached out to all the local karate schools. The people that were in charge of casting extras figured out the best way to find martial artists is get in touch with martial arts schools. So they kind of put the call out to martial arts schools, and they started within their own area in Wilmington, North Carolina, and then it just kind of progressed out through there, and they had an open audition for martial artists. And it took place on the lot at the movie studio in Wilmington, North Carolina. There's a movie studio that was built there by Dino De Laurentiis. And so anybody who wanted to, who knew about this thing, could drive onto the lot that day, park, show up, and audition for Pat Johnson, this legendary figure in martial arts. Pat Johnson was one of Chuck Norris's best friends. He ran one of Chuck Norris's schools for him, was a major black belt competitor. He actually appears in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, and is probably most well known in pop culture circles for being the referee at the end of the original Karate Kid with Ralph Macchio and William Zabka, because he taught all those guys karate for that movie, and then that was the part he played. Well, Pat Johnson was the stunt coordinator and fight choreographer for Ninja Turtles. And as all as martial artists, we all showed up. We drove onto the lot in North Carolina. There was a big, long table. Pat sat behind it with his assistant. And one by one, over the course of what seemed like hours, martial artists got up and got to demonstrate their individual abilities in front of Pat. And if he liked what you were doing, he would ask you to do more. He would ask you if you knew how to do any weapons and you could demonstrate those. Then he would ask you to his assistant would throw punches and kicks at you, and you would have to act like you were getting beat up. And if he liked what you were doing, again, he would ask you to do more and then eventually move on to the next guy. And I was one of 100 or more guys that were there that day. I couldn't tell you how many, but it was a shitload of people. And one by one, we got up in front of Pat. I got up in front of him, and I had been competing in martial arts my whole life, ever since I was 13 years old, my whole life, for 8-9 years before that. And so I just went through all those routines, and Pat asked me for thing after thing. He said, "Oh, you do weapons?" And I did the couple of different weapons I do, including nunchucks. And then I took hits from his assistant and demonstrated that stuff. And then that was it. Then he was like, "Thank you very much." And I kind of went on my way, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I was nervous. I didn't know if I did great or if I sucked or anything like that. And within a few hours, I got a call, and I was hired to be one of the main foot soldiers that was part of the Foot Clan working for the Shredder in the movie. And that was my start. That's how it all kind of came down. We're getting in front of Pat Johnson, doing my thing, and then getting the call that said, "You're a ninja."
I don't know if this is an intention when you were doing the book originally, but like it was kind of also a lovely tribute to Pat Johnson, who's a figure like I don't know. Frankly, I didn't know who he was before this, and it was really cool to learn all this about this guy, and then to hear the stories of you fucking up in front of him too is really funny. But it was really a
Well,
lovely tribute to him, which I thought was nice.
yeah, and I appreciate your sentiment on that. I've heard that from a couple of different people, and yes, I meant the most honor and respect to Pat because, as I talk about in my book, he took me under his wing and he mentored me, and he became a father figure. And I would go on years after that to spend Thanksgivings and other holidays at his home.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we became very close, and he really helped me a lot when I first got to Los Angeles after those movies. So to know that that was captured and to be able to hear that from a couple of different people who share that with me, it then warms my heart because I know that it came across the right way. He was like a father figure to me, and I wanted to honor him like that in the book, and I think I did. And I think talking about fucking up in front of him and getting hung over and not doing good stuff on the set, things like that.
Yeah.
It was just, sort of the son trying hard, but sometimes messing up
It
under
was
his
fun
dad.
because I came for the turtle thing, right? But it was a nice like, oh, this is something. It's somebody I should have known about already, and it was a nice like. It was just a really cool tribute to him, which I thought. And
Yeah.
he just passed away 2 years ago, give or take.
Yeah, he just passed away within the last year, just before that. I think he was 80 or 80
Wow.
something.
Sure.
And it's interesting because now I'm at the age I was a kid fresh out of college with all my hopes and dreams in front of me. And Pat Johnson was sort of taking me by the hand to get there. And I realize now I'm older now than Pat was when I met Pat for
Oh
the
wow.
first time. I'm the guy that's now in my 50s and in that same position. So to look back after 35 years is a pretty incredible thing. And I was really sorry to see the world lost him last year. He was a very powerful figure, an influential figure. And if you could see him on the set, the way that he commanded this army of martial artists, there was no question that he was our sensei and our teacher.
That's cool. Yeah, so much to the point where like you were I love it was so interesting to hear you. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But like in the second movie you went from you did stunts for Raphael in the first movie. In the second movie you were the super performer. And then but like to almost like this sense that regret that you're like, "Oh, maybe I should still be doing the stunts because of your reverence for Pat Johnson" was really interesting.
Yeah, it was. People often ask me what was the most fun working on the movies. Um, and because I did so many different things, everything was fun. And and really, because I had the progression of simply getting that first job from Pat Johnson. I mean, that first job was the title for the job was Special Abilities Extra, and it paid $75 a day. It wasn't like Hollywood stuntman or actor or Screen Actors Guild performer or anything like that. It was Special Abilities Extra. But because that was my first step into the movie world in front of a camera doing martial arts, that was like the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And then on that first movie, when I got to be the fellow Chucker, and that was awesome because it was the first time I ever sat in front of a camera by myself, and the director knew my name, and he said, "Ken, are you ready? And can you?" And that was the greatest day of my life. And then I got lines as a ninja, and I got my Screen Actors Guild card out of that, and that was the greatest day. And then the next movie, I became Raphael, and that was the greatest day. And then in the next movie, I went from stunt Raphael to actor Raphael. So, and that became the greatest day. So it was so exciting to do all these things. But when somebody asked me what was the most fun, it was like being on the first movie with Pat Johnson and all the martial artists and doing martial arts. That was exciting and thrilling and being like Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and all that. The second movie was great because as one of the actors in the animatronic suits, I was part of the first unit. So more often than not, all the energy of the filmmaking process was focused on me and the other turtles. So that feels really special. You're the first unit, you're working with the director, you're doing your thing. But being in those suits and doing those things was not as much fun as being in the other suits and doing the martial arts and the stunts and all that kind of stuff.
So to be clear, in the movie, so you're the fellow Chucker, and then you're the foot who shouts, is it Bacentos now? I don't know the name of the weapon.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Is there another notable foot that I know? Because you probably, I mean, like if we were to divide it up, you probably played like 7 foot soldiers, give or take.
Yeah, mostly what happens is when you see the scene where all the foot soldiers invade April O'Neil's apartment, they've just beaten Raphael up on the roof. Raphael falls through the skylight and he is unconscious. So he's nowhere in the fight. So in that fight, which was shot over a long period of time, it's probably the most time was spent on that scene than almost any other scene really in the movie.
Oh, that makes sense. Sure. A lot of bodies.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah. It was a 3-level fight. It started on a roof, went down through the skylight into the apartment. Then from the apartment, we crashed through the floors down into the antique shop below, and it caught on fire. So that series of events went on over, a week, if not more.
Wow.
So during the scene where all the foot soldiers invade April's apartment, I'm everywhere. I'm crashing through the walls. I'm swinging through the windows like Tarzan. I mean, it's me and a couple other stunt guys.
Yeah.
I'm swinging through the windows like Tarzan. I'm jumping through the skylights. Most of the scenes where you see the turtles fighting a premier foot soldier, it's not always me, but a large percentage of the time it's me swinging the swords at the turtles, and then I'm ducking down, and I have all these like sort of unique exchanges that are just more than like flying through the background and stuff like that. So I'm all over the place in that fight scene. The most notable place being when the action stops and Michelangelo goes, "Oh, a fellow chucker, eh?" And we do nunchucks, and I'm the foot soldier that's doing nunchucks back and forth. And then once the fight escalates a little bit, there's a moment where one of the ninjas goes, "Bacentos, now!" And he calls for the battle axes.
Yeah.
And that's me calling for him. And then I'm the one who has the battle axe that's chasing them across the floor and hacking through the floor until the floor kind of breaks through. Now, mind you, up until that moment, there's a scene that we shot that does not show up in the movie.
Yeah.
Now, I believe it does show up somewhere in some foreign overseas versions.
Really? Cool.
I've been told, and I think I've seen it. I can't swear to this. It may have been a drug-induced haze. I don't know. I believe that in like a German version, this scene exists. I can't swear to that though. But what happened was Pat Johnson came to me one day and he said, "Ken, there's a scene where one of the foot soldiers talks to Donatello and has a fight with them. And we want you to do that." And I was like, now, the actual guy who was supposed to do it was Tom DeWeer, the stunt guy who worked for Pat Johnson. But I had written a letter to Pat about my life's dreams and goals and all this kind of stuff. And it just so happened that his friend Tom, who was supposed to play the part that day, who already had a contract on the film as a Screen Actors Guild performer, got sick. And because Tom got sick, they needed a different ninja to take his place, and whichever ninja or foot soldier was willing to do that part or was able to do the part was going to get their Screen Actors Guild card. And Pat came to me one day and he said, "Ken, we've got to do this part. Tom is sick. I need somebody to do it. If the director approves you, you'll get your Screen Actors Guild card." Now, I would come to find out later, I think, that Tom was never really sick. Pat had kind of set this up, and so that he had an excuse for the producers why he needed to bring somebody else in, i.e. me. And so Pat was really doing me a big favor getting me my Screen Actors Guild card. It's kind of a side story, which is the way I got the part of Talkative Foot number 2, where there's a scene in the script where in that scene where they're fighting in April's apartment, Donatello is fighting with a foot soldier, and the foot soldier says, "I'm going to turn you into turtle soup, but first I'm going to shill you like an oyster." And then they fight, and the guy gets his ass kicked. Well, that was the part. And I went and I auditioned for I had to do it for the director, Steve Barron. He approved me. I was able to do it. This got me my Screen Actors Guild card. It was super awesome. I mean, again, it was one of those moments that was the greatest day of my life. And then ultimately what happened was it got cut out of the final film. It's not in the movie. I don't know what happened to it. But like I said, I think it shows somewhere else in the foreign world. However, it did get me a credit in the movie. So even though I'm the fellow Chucker and the guy that screams for the Bacentos, and that's why I could scream for the Battle Axes, because they already paid me to say those lines. Yeah, they didn't have to then pay another guy $500 for the day to say Bacentos now. They just used me. So in the credits, I'm out of 28 credits in the movie at the end for actors, I'm the 26th credit as talkative foot number 2.
For saying Bacentos, because the other, would you have still gotten your card if they cut the first one? If they didn't do a second?
Yeah, okay. It doesn't matter if they cut it or not.
Sure how that works.
The fact that we shot it, I still get the credit and still for having done it.
I love the story that you told about how you went from, I don't know, the lower tier of Foot Ninja to the higher tier, the skateboard story. I don't know if you can relay that, but that's really wonderful.
Yeah, I had been hired originally just as a special abilities extra. And really what we were doing is we were getting beat up by the turtles. That was our job. Sure. So for the first 2 weeks to 3 weeks of working on the movie, we didn't even shoot. All we did is rehearse. We were just choreographing fight scenes with Pat Johnson, working on a soundstage. It was the 4 stunt turtles, who were 3 guys from Hong Kong and Ernie Reyes Jr., and then a bunch of foot soldiers. And there was like 5 or 6 primary foot soldiers, and then there was like 10, and then throughout the film they would bring in, on days when they needed a lot, 10 to 25 other guys that would be foot soldiers at any one time. Now I was brought in as the core group, but as we were choreographing each of the fight scenes, I wasn't really being utilized that much. Pat was he was working with the other, like there was 2 or 3 guys. There was one guy named Paul Beam, and we would eventually go on to become great friends. God rest his soul. Paul Beam also passed away a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But Paul Beam and Tom DeWeer, who again has recently passed away. Tom was the stunt performer that got sick the other time. He was actually Ralph Macchio's stunt double in Karate Kid 3. And that's how he met Pat. And then Pat brought him on to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to be the utility stunt performer and double the Shredder when he fell off the roof, and double any foot soldiers that needed to work near fire and flame or anything like that. So Tom was like our one utility stunt guy. So Tom was being used and stuff. Paul Beam was being used. This one other martial artist. And that was kind of it. They just kept using the same guys over and over during the choreography. And one day we were rehearsing, and they were trying this one scene where in the movie, Donatello skateboards down the sewer, fighting his way through different foot soldiers using his bow staff. And the scene they wanted to shoot, the moment they wanted to capture, was one of the foot soldiers running away from Donatello as he skateboards, and Donatello coming up behind him on the skateboard, sweeping his feet out from under him, and the guy flies up in the air and lands flat on his back as Donatello continues off into the sunset. Well, as they were practicing this stunt, they would call up one of the foot soldiers. The foot soldier would start doing it, and then as soon as the guy swept his legs out, it just didn't look natural. The guy kind of fell awkwardly. It didn't kind of work. So they stopped. They didn't work with him. The Hong Kong guys were talking amongst themselves. You could tell they weren't pleased with what was happening. So they brought up another guy, and he tried it. It was kind of awkward. And I was standing there radiating this energy, like, pick me, pick me, pick me. And they just weren't picking me, and nobody was getting it right. So I walked over to the guy who was a translator for the Hong Kong stunt guys, because I figured I didn't want to go interrupt Pat Johnson. And I said, hey, tell them I can do this. And the guy was like, what? And I go, tell them I can do this. And I just knew that I could get this thing right. So he walked over. He spoke Cantonese to these guys. All of a sudden, those guys are talking Cantonese. They say something to Pat Johnson. Pat looks over at me and he goes, Ken, come here. And so I walk up and he goes, I want you to try this. Or he said something to the effect of, you can do this. Okay. So I got in my position, ready, action. I started running. The Hong Kong guy comes up behind me, sweeps my legs out. And man, I took what I felt like was a perfect Cirque du Soleil, walk up into the wall and just bam, fall flat on my back in the air. And as soon as I was done, the Hong Kong guys were like clapping their hands, like, yes, yes, this is it, this is it. So Pat Johnson was like, okay, let's put Kenn down for the skateboard stunt. And from that moment after that, the Hong Kong guys and Pat Johnson, every time sort of something was needed, now they would look at me and they go, Kenn, come here, come here. And I would get to stand up. And so by doing that skateboard stunt, kind of getting it right after all those guys, I guess I had like unlocked the keys to the kingdom. And I'd shown the Hong Kong guys that I could move and do a certain thing. And it was something I'd worked for my whole life. Everything I had was in it. I wasn't just like some local martial arts guy from tournaments that was like, hey, what's going on here? My whole adolescence and college career was spent on trying to be a martial arts action hero. And by having that moment in front of those guys, I guess I kind of had the goods, and then that got me on the VIP list. And from that moment, that's when it all kind of took off.
Now you did, and then after that, because you became a go-to a guy for that, when the guy who was doing Raphael stunts got hurt, you were able to step up and become Raphael.
Yeah, they were.
And you were the right height and everything for Raphael,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We film. Actually, I was the tallest turtle. I was taller than anybody else.
Raphael is a little bigger than the rest. Yeah, yeah.
But we film. Movies get shot out of sequence, right? Like the very last thing we filmed was the opening of the movie, which is the fight in the subway when Raphael saves April O'Neil from the foot soldiers. I mean, it's a few minutes in, and so we shot that way kind of near the end of the movie. But early in the shooting of the movie was the scene where Raphael meets Casey Jones in Central Park. And that scene was shot in a combination of North Carolina and New York. The fight between Raph and Casey was shot in North Carolina early in the movie. In that scene, when Casey Jones pulls out a cricket bat, Raphael's like, cricket? You got to know what a crumpet is. Don't understand cricket. He hits him with the bat. Raphael flies through the air, lands in a trash can head first. Well, when they shot that scene in North Carolina, they took the guy from Hong Kong, who was Raphael's stunt double, hung him up upside down, and on action, they literally just dropped him head first into a trash can. And when he hit, the head kind of compressed and it broke his nose. And because of the way the turtle head rests on your head and the bridge of your nose and all this, he was no longer able to wear the Raphael costume and be Raphael. So right away, they needed somebody who could be Raphael for the rest of the movie and do all the action, all the fighting. So where were they going to get a martial artist that could do this? Most of the guys had already come from Hong Kong. One of them had gotten hurt and was replaced by Ernie Reyes Jr. out of Los Angeles. So now they didn't have time to go back to Hong Kong to bring somebody over. They needed somebody there now. And on a movie set, time is money. Every day you're not shooting, you're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, depending on the size of the film. So they turned to Pat Johnson and they said, do you have anybody that could be Raphael and do all the action and fighting for this turtle that needs to be done? And Pat immediately came to me and he said, Kenn, I want you to go to the creature shop, which is what we call the Jim Henson area.
Yeah, sure.
Go up there, and if you can fit into the Raphael costume, you're going to be the new Raphael and do all the action and fighting for him. And I was like, oh my God, this is my dreams coming true. So I walked up, I went to the creature shop, and they started pulling out the Raphael costume. Now, mind you, I'm a little bit bigger than Josh Pais, the actor who played Raphael in the animatronic suit, and much bigger and bulkier than the guy named Nam, who was the Hong Kong stunt double. So I had to squeeze into this Raphael suit, so much so that one or two of the parts here and there, like the calves, didn't quite fit my feet, and I had to wear like Leonardo's feet to actually fit in the Raphael costume. But they kind of Frankenstein me together out of these different turtle parts, put the Raphael head on me, and they were like, boom, you're the new Raphael. And from that moment, my whole life changed. And now 35 years later, here we are talking about it.
Now so the movie was obviously directed by Steve Barron. Who I've had the pleasure of interviewing before. He's wonderful. And second unit was Brian Henson. Did you spend more time taking direction from Barron or Henson?
On the first movie, most of my direction was from Brian Henson.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. However, when it came to like featured moments, when we did the fellow Chucker scene, that was with
Right.
Steve Barron. Whenever I spoke with Talking to Foot number 2 part, even the Bacentos now, that was Steve Barron. So Steve, because there's the interactivity of stunt work and the first unit of talking, the animatronic turtles, there was a lot of times where things kind of had to be coordinated, and a certain portion of the day would be spent with second unit doing things. And then first unit would come in, or second unit would be working, but Steve Barron might be in charge of it for those few moments while we're doing some action sequences and stuff. So for me, it was a combination of I got to work with both.
What were each of them like? I'm curious about both of them, frankly.
Well, Brian Henson, who I spent more time sort of talking with outside of just action and cut, was just a super, super likable, gregarious guy, man. I remember at the time, I believe I might get it wrong. I think he was 28.
So he was pretty young.
He was between 26 to 28 years old when he was the second unit director on that movie. And I remember asking him, because I was like 21 or 22 at the time, and he was like, yeah, I'm 26, but at the time he smoked a lot of cigarettes. Okay. I don't think he does that anymore. But yeah, he was super fun, super creative, and just very, very generous and gracious with the people that he was working with. I would imagine the culture that he came up in, his father, who I did not spend a lot of time interacting with, but sometime, there was one day where I got to interact with Jim Henson a little bit. He has a very demanding father, but a very collaborative environment in which he grew up. Sure. So I'm sure growing up in that, he grew up with people like Frank Oz and all these other people that he was kind of in awe of and looking at. So he was very gracious and giving to all the performers around him, which was great. Steve Barron was just like a brilliant Englishman. I don't know how else to describe it. And not necessarily that he's from England, but he just had that European sensibility about him, that overseas sensibility. For me, as a kid who grew up in North Carolina, sitting there with a visionary music director like Steve Barron speaking with his English accent just makes me feel like, I'm in some crazy fantasy adventure of my own. So I didn't spend a lot of time socializing with Steve, but watching him work was really awe-inspiring, because again, I didn't have anything to compare it to, so I can't say he was different than other directors or same. This is my first, besides working as an extra in a couple of films here and there, this is my first long-term involvement with a director. But he put this movie together like an art film, versus what I would later learn in my career was how, bigger budget action extravaganzas are put together. It wasn't like that. There wasn't stunt casting going on. And it was dark, and it was brooding, and it was dangerous. Yeah. That's one of the things I always think the first film differed from certainly the second one, and most assuredly from the third, in that the first one, it wasn't just dangerous because there was fighting going on. It was dangerous because there was teenagers committing felonies and smoking and drinking, and people were being killed in this movie. Yeah. So there was a certain level of consequence present in the first movie that wasn't there for me in the second movie. Of course, they're fighting, and you think they're fighting for their lives and all this, but that sense of sort of dread and darkness didn't seem to pervade the later things. So to be around Steve Barron, who I had seen direct Storyteller, and again, the amazing music videos, Dire Straits, and
a ton of them. Oh my gosh.
And all that stuff. It felt like like I said, it felt like an incredible international adventure to be working with him.
I'm curious. How did he differ? How did it differ with the second movie with Michael Pressman? I've also interviewed him. Also, very nice guy. I'm just curious because the movies are so different, and the second movie I know was very rushed. Was there a difference in tone for you having been in both?
Oh, tremendously. I mean, the The first movie was, like I said, the first movie was like a dark, brooding film. And there were moments of comedy in it and everything. But I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at Raphael and the character of the kid, Danny, and all this stuff, I mean, these are guys that are dealing with identity issues and crises and, stuff. I mean, really dark kind of material. When you get into the second movie was more like a live action version of the cartoon.
Yeah.
And you have the visionary music director of Steve Barron and the storytelling. I mean, he had experience working with the Henson organization. So working in that magical kind of dark realm. Yeah. And then you had Michael Pressman, who directed Dr. Detroit, which, was a super funny movie. But it's a different sensibility.
Yeah.
And that sensibility is sort of evident throughout the movie. And the directions and the mandates he was given to create something that would be more quote unquote kid friendly or family friendly, really. So
as a martial arts guy, was it frustrating for you to that Raphael never uses his weapon and things like that? Like, does that?
No, that's no. For me personally, it didn't matter because I wasn't martial arts Raphael in the second movie.
Right.
I was actor Raphael. So as a performer, I wasn't like missing out on the challenges and of doing something exciting with the weaponry. As an actor, I wasn't really concerned about how they were solving the kid issues and what Raph was going to do. They were just going to be whatever they needed to be to make the movie work.
Sure.
And make it work for the audience. So remarkably, I mean, the martial artist that came in on the second movie, instead of going to Hong Kong, Pat stayed in America and he pulled a guy named Stephen Ho, who was, a world-class, amazing martial artist. Eventually, a guy named David Wald came in, Larry Lamb, another world-class martial artist. And these are guys that have gone on to become martial arts choreographers and stunt coordinators of their own right in the business. And so this amazing troupe that Pat Johnson was able to put together made up for, in gymnastics and acrobatic excitement, what was lost in perhaps the violence of the application of weapons.
I remember I talked to Francois Chow not long ago. and it was hilarious. All he did was talk about how I don't really do anything in the movie.
Yeah.
He just stands around. It's great.
Francois is so much fun. We spend a lot of
Shredder,
time.
I should say. It's just for people don't get.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time at Comic-Cons together. There's
Lovely
a whole
guy.
There's a whole group of us that travel together. And Francois is so much fun. And he's a legit martial artist too. He and I are amongst the group of us that travel, you have Ernie Reyes, Francois Chow, and myself, who are all still active martial artists in our life. So it's a bond we kind of share.
Oh, nice.
And when we're doing the panels and people ask various questions, it's funny to hear them ask Francois this question. They always say, what was it like playing the Shredder? And, were you really excited to play this part? And he always says, man, I was so excited because I'm a martial artist and I thought this was going to be a chance. I was going to get to fight the turtles and punch and kick. And he goes, really, all I do around is point. And I go get those turtles. Get those turtles. He's like, so I don't really do anything except point.
And then when finally the character turns into this mutant and does something, it's an entirely different actor.
Yeah, Kevin Nash,
yeah,
which was amazing to have that guy walk on the set. Kevin Nash walked on the set to play Super Shredder, and he was super young, and again, really sweet. I found for the most part, not everybody, but especially on Ninja Turtles, everybody that was on Ninja Turtles was so thankful and happy to be there. I've subsequently been on movie sets where people work and some people bitch about various things and whatever, and they're just not necessarily pleasant or they don't enhance the experience. But every single person on that movie was just thankful to be there. And it was so many first opportunities. Kevin Nash, it was the first movie I think that he had shown up in. Many people don't even recognize that Sam Rockwell, the Academy Award nominated actor, his first job was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So many people just doing their Elias Koteas. Judith Hogue. Judith tells a great story about people who love Ninja Turtles, in that she was working on Cadillac Man at the time that she got the job in Ninja Turtles. And she had to fly back and forth during the weekends. She would work on Cadillac Man, and then she would fly down to North Carolina to shoot Ninja Turtles. And or somehow they overlapped right at the end or something like that. And she had to explain to the producers that she had to leave by a certain time, and she was very nervous about it. And Robin Williams said to her, "You have to leave. Why? What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, well, I have a job on another movie." He's like, "What movie?" And she was very embarrassed to tell him. And she said, "Well, it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles." And she said he flipped out. He loved Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And he said, "Are you playing April O'Neil?" And she was like, "Yes, I am." And he was like, "Oh my gosh." So he worked with the producers to do everything that he could to help her get where she needed to be to go do the movie and make it all work out together. So it was stories like that and the kind of energy that was going on around it that made it such a cool thing. And Kevin Nash was just like that. He came on the set. He was super sweet, giant of a guy. And as we started to work on the action sequences with him, I remember specifically during the choreography, somebody took a swing at him. And, and when you're doing movie stunts, you don't actually hit anybody. You use camera angles so that you can stack the action so it looks like you're hitting them, but you're not. And somebody took a swing and he didn't react very well. And Pat Johnson's like, "Hey, you got to move your head." And he said to Pat, "Well, you go ahead and hit me." And Pat was like, "No, we're not going to hit you. That's not the way it works." He's like, "No, I'm used to it. Go ahead and hit me. That's what I do. I take it." And so Pat was like, "No, Kevin, that's not the way we're going to do it. This is how it works." And so Kevin kind of had to adjust a little bit to a whole thing there. It was kind of funny to see that big old guy be like, "Just go ahead and hit me." It's like, "Nope."
Now, so okay, one thing I'm so curious about. So to be clear, it takes four people for anybody to come to life, for all the turtles to come to life. There's the main performer, there's the animatronics controller guy, there's the stunt performer, and then in post they add in the voice, like Corey Feldman for Donatello, for example.
Yep.
Now, in the first movie, because you did the stunts, you didn't have the servos. Did you ever have to coordinate with the animatronics person on the first movie?
No, the only thing we had to do
Okay.
was in the fight choreography, we had to make sure that our final actions equated to where we needed to be for when first unit would shoot the turtle, then standing up and saying
Okay.
whatever they needed to do or anything like that. So they would come around and they would work and watch and observe, but I never had to work directly with the puppeteer or the animatronic system during the action sequences.
Now, in the second one, though, it's David Greenaway, right?
Yep, David Greenaway was my puppeteer. He was Raphael's puppeteer for both the first and second film.
Now, did you have to be like, did you both deliver the lines at the same time? Like, you guys had to be really in sync to each of you perform the parts of the character simultaneously.
Yeah, basically what happened was on the second movie, 2 or 3 weeks of rehearsal was spent with the puppeteers and the animatronic suit performers working together to try to create one cohesive character from two different people. So we would do exercises and games. For instance, we all flew over to London, myself, Michelin Sisti, who was the animatronic suit actor for Michelangelo, Leif Tilden, who was Donatello, and Mark Casso, who was the new Leonardo. So we would all show up in London, and we went to an old high school gym, and each one of us put on our turtle heads with the animatronic servos in it, and the puppeteers were standing there with their remote control devices. And then we would proceed to spend hours at a time either playing charades or doing improv comedy, just like you see on that show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? And so we would literally have two people trying to create one character doing improv with three other characters being controlled by six other people. So there was all this exponential stuff happening. So what would happen over time is that we came to know each other. We kind of knew what to expect. We knew how the cadences were going to go, the speaking patterns. And then we started to do it with rehearsals in the script. We would be on the set or before we would get there, let's walk through this, let's step through this. And the actor in the suit knows the lines, and the performer operating the animatronics knows the lines. And then what happens is when you're on set, if you're listening to the actual production sound, you'll hear the English accented voice of the puppet performer being like, yo, dudes, let's go on there. Cowabunga, everybody. But you'll also hear from behind the rubber mask and motors, the actor's voice calling out the lines at the exact same time as it's
So
all
you
coming.
both were in like had to say it together, right?
Yeah. We were
Oh,
wearing
wow.
headphones and had microphones, and we could hear each other and would coordinate it all together.
Wow. Okay. I mean, by the time you'd gotten to filming, was that pretty much, like, was that still very difficult to do to kind of sync it up or no?
No, it was you really what happens, Brian, is you spend this initial 2 or 3 weeks in what I'm going to call a closed environment. You're wearing a turtle head, and the only person you really have contact with is in the headphone in your ear.
Okay.
And so for 6 hours or more for half the day, and then the rest of the day, you're just carrying on conversations with that person, either about the work or about not the work or stuff. And you just start to get to know them. You develop a very intimate relationship
Sure.
with that person.
Well,
And
you're kind
so,
of blind a little bit, and they're the one holding your arm.
yeah,
Of
it's
course.
you're giving you have the responsibility of making sure that they are looking and emoting things the right way in the right direction, and they have the responsibility of making you talk and come to life. And so
Mhm.
the two of you have to have this symbiotic thing that goes on. And so over the course of that initial period, you develop this unity, you develop a relationship, and you develop a shorthand. So once you get on set and you start walking through things, you have the ability to communicate with them and say, okay, hey, what if I walk over here and then I'll turn and face and let's say that part of the line, then wait a second and I'll turn to the left and do this. What do you think of that? And so we just kind of have the ability to piece through it really quickly, choreograph our blocking, and then just perfect it over the course of several takes. If that's what I get, that's what we need.
That's so like I just it's so interesting, and so like, and then in post, then basically they had to do ADR with Laurie Faso, right? He played him in the second one,
On the
Raphael.
second movie, yeah, he
Yeah.
was the voice.
So basically, they just, I mean, there was no room for improv on their end unless it was a turnaway thing, right? Like it was all like it was the exact same lines we saw in the movie. It must be, or close to.
Well, look, I wasn't in those ADR sessions, but I will say this,
Sure.
because on subsequent film, like on the third film, they actually had a challenge where they did have to improv stuff because the turtle's lips would move sometimes. The mechanics weren't necessarily the same as the Henson organization,
Yeah.
electronics and mechanics, and so things would kind of move sometimes, and they'd have to put pieces in, or they would actually rewrite during post production and have to change things. So the thing was, in the first couple of films, while there may have been instances where a line was changed here or there, the truth of the matter was, yes, there was a recording of, I think there was one American, but I might get it wrong, but mostly English puppeteers recording the track of the turtles talking, and then the VO guys had to recreate those particular lines. Like I said, unless something got changed. Like I remember two lines that are in the script got changed, but one of them got changed in performance. When Raphael meets Casey in Central Park in the movie, Raphael says, "Jose Canseco bet, tell me you didn't pay money for this." I think that's the way they shot it, but the line in the script is actually names a different player. It says, "A Wade Boggs bet, tell me you didn't pay money for this." And I think Wade Boggs was a player at that time that
Sure.
maybe was in the decline, but Jose Canseco had come out in the news recently as being a bit eccentric, and so the line played a little bit more timely. Now, one of the other lines, and I'm not sure if this was changed in post or when they shot it, because I actually watched, it's funny enough, I actually watched the dailies of this the other day. I have dailies from the film with the original recordings of the actors, of the puppeteers talking.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
when all the foot soldiers break into April O'Neil's apartment, the line in the movie says, Michelangelo goes, "And I thought insurance salesmen were pushy." But the line in the dailies that said is, "And I thought Jehovah's Witnesses were pushy." And that's actually what they said when it was
Sure.
shot. So I'm assuming that got changed in post-production, something like that. So that's just one example of where they edited a line. But to answer your question in a long-winded way is, no, I don't think there was a lot of improv on the first or second movie, but there may have been more than I thought.
That must, I mean, are you able to show those dailies at like cons or anything? Because that's I don't know if you're allowed to, but that would be cool to see. Is like,
Yes, I'm trying to figure out the appropriateness of
gotcha.
Showing things.
Sure, that sounds very cool though. I mean, like that's another thing. Like I didn't, like I said, I think I know everything, and then I learned all this stuff from your book. And I talked to who did I talk to this morning? Jeff Goodwin, who did the makeup on the movie. I learned stuff from him.
Okay.
Um, one person who I loved hearing about, and it was just a little snippet, but I loved hearing about Raymond Serra, who played Chief Stearns in the movie.
Oh yeah,
Like he just sounded like such a character. That guy.
he was a character, man. He was exactly like he was on screen. He was just this little fireball, and I can see him. Now looking back, you can see him playing that chief. I could see him playing any kind of mafioso character. I could see him playing any kind of like a, I don't know, cop, FBI agent.
He's doing a great
rabbi.
Jackie Gleason kind of thing in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was funny about him though in person was he was a real New York guy, and he was kind of a pinky ring, gold chain guy. He was like, "Come here, baby." He called everybody baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. And I just loved him. He was just he was a bundle of great energy.
I'd love to hear like what it's been like for you, like returning to the franchise, especially more recently, because it's oh Christ, what's the name of the group that you guys all have together?
Celebration, Turtle
Yes, the Turtle
Celebration.
Celebration group with you, Judith, and Robbie Rist. I mean, what's that been like for you?
Well, the celebration, Turtle Celebration is a traveling group of us who go to cons, and sometimes it's just the four turtles, and sometimes it's Turtles and Shredder and April and Splinter. We have it all was born out of the fact that we've all been going to Comic Cons and meeting fans, which is an amazing, wonderful experience to go out, to be able now 35 years and over 35 years to be able to share with the fans and the people whose lives this has touched. It's touched ours in a certain way. It's touched theirs in a certain way. And then when we come together, there's sort of like this great unification. The great conjunction happens. So what happens was these are so much fun that we started having fun together. Like Brian Tochi and I loved traveling together to go to cons. We just have a great time. We feel like two old friends. And so whenever we get there, we enjoy the city, we enjoy the people. Well, that expanded to include Robbie Rist and his lovely wife, Allie, and Ernie Reyes Jr. And with right there, we've got all four turtles from the original movies, plus Keno, based on the parts that everybody's played. Judith Hogue is a good friend of ours, so she joined on board. Francois Chow, who's the Shredder in number 2, he loves to travel with us. James Saito, who's the Shredder from number 1, he's involved with us in travels. And Kevin Clash is all part. So we have this group, and when we go to cons, not only do we have fun and really these amazing, profound experiences meeting fans, but we have such a great time together that the energy that we bring and the way we love being together, it just radiates out in what we're doing. You can feel it at the cons. The fans can feel it. The promoters can feel it. The volunteers can feel it. We feel it. And it's just like, I would never compare anything about making movies to real or actual war. That would just be inane. But it's like we went through battle together.
Sure.
And by doing that, we formed this bond, this brotherhood, fraternity, sorority, family. And so now 35 years later, to still be together and still be traveling and going to cons. And when we're together, my God, the power at the cons is exponential. If one of us goes to a con, it's great. We might be sitting next to a Power Ranger or Winnie the Pooh or Sting, or you never know who it's going to be. But when you get 4 turtles and a Shredder and an April O'Neil sitting in one area celebrating Ninja Turtles, we've had fans come from other countries. We've had fans come from, we had somebody come from Alaska to the last one we did just because we were all together. And it's just amazing the way it goes on. So it's been awesome. in terms of being together, being able to travel around the country and the world, and being able to exchange all that amazing energy with the fans of Ninja Turtles.
My last question for you. Usually I ask people who their favorite turtle is, but I mean, there's no way it's not Raphael for you, right? So I figured, what's your favorite kind of pizza?
Well, anchovy.
Cool.
I mean, the truth of the matter is I'm a pizza guy. I have a pizza tattoo. Pizza is my favorite food in the world. Long before Ninja Turtles, I'm all about pizza. And so everywhere I travel in the world and to every Comic-Con I go to, I do research ahead of time. So if anybody's listening to this and you know I'm coming to your town or you know I'm going somewhere, if you know of a real legit pizza place, I don't go in for big chains, anything like that. I want the real deal pizza. I like thick, I like thin, square. It doesn't matter. All pizza is good. I do my research. I find pizza places. And then once we get there, usually the Turtle crew comes with me. Robbie Rist, Michelangelo, Brian Tocci, Leonardo. We've all been on pizza adventures together, going out and finding the best pizza. So not many people eat it. My favorite down is anchovy. But I used to eat a lot of pepperoni and jalapeno. That was my favorite. And now I'm on a just cheese kick for the purity of it with maybe some fresh tomatoes.
I'm all set. Kenn, thank you so much for doing this. Again, the book is Teenage Ninja the Mutant Turtle. You can get it on Amazon, Audible. And thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate talking to you.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Appreciate your time, man.
All right, take care.
Cowabunga, dude.
Bye.
Yakake is back again. Just picked up paper and pen to create a little song to sing so y'all can hear the jam I bring. Danny D laid down the track for me to kick up. The kid is back. Folk are singing Danny's tune. For y'all, the blacks are new till noon. So everybody party hard so you go drop. Don't stop, but there is reason to feast at least this decade. When who was made Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are on the scene. So keep it green and keep it clean. Keep cool the golden rules. Don't mess up, act no fool. Wanna know where they coming from? Teenage Turtles are awesome. Here's the story as it goes. What it is, no turtle knows. But they're about to soon find out. And when they do, there will be no doubt. This shall no longer be secret. And you won't ask me what is it. And it don't matter where or what one's from. As long as you ain't dumb, come and have a good time. Everybody, everyone, you all come on over. Let's have a ball. Getting down with Jimmy. Do a cut that's slimming. Don't hold back, get loose. The time is right. I like the hype type. Get into it, do it right. Look and watch the ninja fight. Betcha I know where they come from. Teenage Turtles are awesome. Mic check, 1 2 1 2. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Mic check, 1 2 1 2. 1 2. Everybody. Mic check, 1 2 1 2. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Mic check, 1 2 1 2. 1 2. Everybody. I suppose you all know from this. There's something you won't want to miss. A squad of green heroes in the city, so keep the city green, clean and pretty. They fight the bad and protect the good, the way a turtle should and would. Do not worry, do not fear. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are here. Yes, now you know the deal and feel the sensation. The beat, the melody, the raw vibration. Put together by Danny D and Yakake, as you know with me. We're gonna lead you to the rhythm of the song so you may dig it. Oh, so strong. Remember to keep the soil fertile, or you have to answer to a turtle. Find out where they come from. Ninja Turtles are awesome.
You